Ethiopia. Okay. If you do some research, you will find that Ethiopia was the term used for southern and western Africa, which the Greeks and Romans considered the inhabitable zone. Okay. Now, you see a map here with the Ethiopian Sea. The southern Atlantic was the Ethiopian Sea or the Ethiopian Ocean. All right, let's go into a little bit of information. You know, the term comes from Herodotus. Okay. I gave you a quote from Herodotus. We'll go into Ethiopia. Okay. Now we have an interesting map here. All right, you see Atlas, you see the Nile, which they have running into West Africa. Okay, you see Ethiopia, the Macrobians, Libya, Carthage. So Libya is Africa, northern Africa, by way of the Greeks and the Romans, is Libya, is Africa. Under the Nile, in this sense, by way of Herodotus, is the Ethiopians. Now, they still have on this map the Indians. It's not even India. It's now Indians from the Indus River. Okay? You have the Persians, the Assyrians, Babylon is on here. And look where the Caucasus Mountains is at. Is at the top, right? Remember, the Caucasus Mountains is supposed to be in Africa. All right? So that's an old map. Okay? According to Herodotus. Okay? And it says, all peoples inhabiting the southernmost fringes of the inhabitable world are known as Ethiopians after their dark skin. All right? It tells you here, Herodotus thought sub-Saharan Africa was Ethiopia. Okay. Now it says the Greek name Ethiopia is a compound. Okay. The designation properly translates in noun form as burnt face and in adjectival form as red brown. Okay. What are they calling the Indians? They calling them red and brown. As such, it was used as a vague term for darker skinned populations than the Greeks. Since the time of Homer, the term was applied to such peoples within the range of observation of the ancient geographers, primarily in what was then Nubia in ancient Sudan. With the expansion of geographical knowledge, the exonym successfully extended to certain other areas below the Sahara. In classical antiquity, the term Africa did not refer to any part of sub-Saharan Africa, but in its widest sense to instead to ancient Libya, what is now known as the Maghreb and the desert to the south. You see? Okay, you get into the Greek civilization, which we know was stolen. All right. But in the sense of Africa, okay, it wasn't the sub-Saharan Africans. Herodotus also remarked on shared cultural practices between the Egyptians and the Ethiopians, okay? For it is plain to see that the Colchians are Egyptians. Now, I showed you the Colchians, all right? They were talking about the Colchians being in Georgia, all right, being in the Caucasus Mountains area. That's where Colchians are. And this that I say, I myself noted before I heard it from others. When I began to think on this matter, I inquired of both peoples, and the Colchians remembered the Egyptians better than the Egyptians remembered the Colchians. The Egyptians said that they held the Colchians to be part of the Zoroastrian's army. I myself guessed it to be so, partly because they are dark-skinned and woolly-haired. All right? You seeing that? It's because they are dark-skinned and woolly-haired. Though that indeed goes for nothing, seeing that other peoples too are such. But my better proof was that the Colchians and Egyptians and Ethiopians are the only nations that have, from the first practice, circumcision. So you see how they were grouped together by way of the woolly hair, right? Herodotus further states that out of 330 kings of Egypt, there had been 18 Ethiopian kings, one native Egyptian queen, and the rest had been Egyptian men. Okay? So there is a comparison to the Egyptians and the Ethiopians, basically the same people. All right? In Book 3, Herodotus defines Ethiopia as the farthest region of Libya, i.e. Africa. Where the south declines towards the setting sun lies the country called Ethiopia, the last inhabited land in that direction. There gold is obtained in great plenty. Huge elephants abound, with wild trees of all sorts and ebony, and the men are taller, handsomer, and long-lived than anywhere else. Herodotus also wrote that the Ammonians of Siwa Oasis are colonists from Egypt and Ethiopia and speak a language compounded of tongues of both countries. Okay? So that lets you know there was a colony of Egypt and Ethiopia that went out and civilized the world. Okay? The Greeks got their information from us. Herodotus also refers to the Ethiopians of Asia, or Ethiopians of the East, who are said to be straight-haired, whereas the Ethiopians from Libya, Africa, have the woolliest hair of all men. Okay? So in this sense, right, Ethiopian was exchanged for Indian. Diodorus Siculus reported that the Ethiopians claimed that Egypt was an early colony, and that the Ethiopians also cited evidence that they were more ancient than the Egyptians, as he wrote. Now, the Ethiopians are more ancient, according to Diodorus Siculus. The Ethiopians say that the Egyptians are one of their colonies which was brought into Egypt by Osiris. Okay? Achilles Tatius described the complexion of the Egyptian herdsmen near Alexandria as dark-colored, yet not absolutely black like an Indian, but more like a bastard Ethiopian. Okay? Now, Indians in India have dark skin. All right? When he says Indian here, all right, they're not talking about American Indians. Strabo discussed migrations between Egypt and Ethiopia in his book, Geography, and noted that the Egyptians settled Ethiopia and Colchis. With regard to the Ethiopians, Strabo indicates that they look similar to Indians. remarking those who are in Asia, South India, and those who are in Africa do not differ from each other. Pliny, in turn, asserts that the place named Ethiopia or Ethiopia was derived from one Aethiop, a son of Vulcan, the Greek god Hephaestus. Now, if you go into Hephaestus, right, you'll know that this god came from Ptah. Okay, you can see Hephaestus and Ta in his name. All right. He also writes that the queen of the Ethiopians bore the title Kandake, and avers incorrectly that the Ethiopians had conquered ancient Syria and the Mediterranean. Following Strabo, the Greco-Roman historian Eusebius claims that the Ethiopians had immigrated into the Red Sea area from the Indus Valley and that there were no people in the region by that name prior to their arrival. Now, I don't believe nobody came from India into Africa unless they left Africa first and came back. The Greek travelogue from the 1st century AD, known as the Periplus of the Ethiopian Sea, initially describes the littoral based on its author's intimate knowledge of the area. However, the Periplus does not mention any dark-skinned Ethiopians among the area's inhabitants. The only latter appear in Ptolemy's Geographia and region far south around the Bantu nucleus of northern Mozambique. Arrian wrote in the 1st century AD that the appearance of the inhabitants is also not very different in India and Ethiopia. The southern Indians are rather more like Ethiopians, as they are black to look on and their hair is black, only they are not so snub-nosed or woolly-haired as the Ethiopians. The northern Ethiopians are most likely the Egyptians physically. Okay? You see that? So who's doing all the teaching and civilizing on the planet? It's the Ethiopians, right? It's the Ethiopians. And the Ethiopians is all around the world on them. Okay? And some more. Now, this is old English right here. Okay, as you see here, when you look in Ethiopia, Sejel, okay, Sun Jewel, Suit, Black Fire. You also got Demon in here. You got Ethiopia in here, right? Balrock. You got to go back now. You got to go back to their mythological stories. Dark Fire, Demon, right? The Hobbits, the original Pygmies. You know, you got to go into their leprechauns, right? Hera, Sigil, Hera, Suit Black. So it's the Black Sun, right? It's the Black Sun. You see they have Gothic, but they have it broke down into Hari. Hari is Hor. You know what I'm saying? Horus. You see Soot, you have Carbo. Okay? Soot is Sudan, right? Matter of fact, Balrock, I think that, ain't that Mike Tyson's, what's that game with the glass chin fool in there, Punch Out or something like that. Mike Tyson was called Balrock. Let me see if that's, all right, when you go to, that wasn't correct, it was Bald Bull, but when you go to J.R. Tolkien's Middle Earth, you know what I'm saying, the Rings of Power and all that, see, you got to mention, they get the power from the Ethiopians, but they call the Ethiopians and things of that nature, the Pygmies of Africa, demons, you know what I'm saying, but here's that word right there, okay? It explores the etymology of the Old English word for the ancient Ethiopians, all right? Including the Civilised or forged sun jewels. The Balrogs are dark fire demons, and the Haradrim, men of the hot south. All right. They know the power has always been with us. Okay. So you look up in this word in Old English, the sigil wara, right? That's the Ethiopians. Okay. There's another picture right there. Ethiopian Sea. Ethiopian Sea. Here's an old map, right? Showing you Ethiopia inferior, which is West Africa. Ethiopia superior, which is Central Africa. Down to the bottom, you get to the bottom, you have Cafre, Cape Town. But Africa is only on top of the Sahara Desert, which is Libya, Tunisia, Morocco. Okay. We're dealing with the Ethiopians that civilized the world. All right. Peace.